What's the fastest you ever quit a job and why? It took me about 2 hours in telemarketing to realize what an asshole I felt like, and then I left. I was hired by a temp agency to file documents in a paint factory office, and when I showed up I was put on the assembly line with zero training or instruction, and the cans came down the conveyor belt at 10,000 miles per hour. I don't even know what I was supposed to do, I just let every can whiz by. I quit end of day 1. At one of those quick lube oil change places when I was about 18. They had me down in the pit under the vehicles draining the oil, and I kept getting burned by hot oil and by hot exhaust pipes. On the second day, I said I had to use the bathroom, and when I walked around to the side of the building I took off running and didn't come back. In college, I got a summer job at Sea Ray Boats through a temp agency. Showed up first thing and they had me sit in the break room, which was on the second floor, overlooking the entire plant. Waited an hour for someone to come get me and heard a commotion. Looked out and 3-4 people were running out, because a dude cut off his middle and ring fingers with a sawzall. The dude behind him had his fingers in a towel. At the time, I wasn't what you might call tool handy. So I noped right the fuck out. 15 minutes before I got there, I had a weird feeling about the job and how vague the hiring manager was being. Halfway to my first day it dawned on me that it was some traveling door-to-door sales shit. The kind where they pack you in a van and drive you to some neighborhood to sell coupon books or whatever. First day. Got out of the Marines and got a job doing hardwood floors for 10 hours. Didn't tell me I had the job, then called and asked where I was. Used a whole tank of gas driving from job to job. First thing boss asked me was, "Are you messed up from the war?" "Yes, I am." Every employee told me how much they hate the job and to run. Finished the day and quit. Sandwich shop. Health inspector showed up. Found mop cleaning solution in the tub they were keeping, the utensils they used make sandwiches with, get meatballs out for subs, spread tuna on sandwiches, etc. That explained the very odd, burning chemical smell from that area. The mop cleaner was mixing with the meatballs and sauce and just cooking all day in that pot. Owner argued that it was safe to use it that way. He dump it out in front of him. The second he left, she filled it back up and put all the utensils back in it. Applied at a trashy local gas station in Oregon. The lady at the counter said there's a $60 charge to test for marijuana in Oregon. I said, "Give me my resume back." She then started fake laughing and going on a tirade about how entitled I am on my way, didn't even own the store. Edit: I don't even smoke weed, I just thought the charge was arbitrary and a little sketchy. Dishwasher, and I lasted one shift. I was 19. The owner chef was a nice guy, but I knew this wasn't the job for me maybe 1 hour into my shift. Finished the shift, told him I wasn't coming back and asked for $40 cash to call it even. He obliged. Even gave me a bowl of risotto. 6 weeks. Got blamed for another delivery driver leaving the tank close to empty and not parked where it needed to be. I was hurt. A week after I left, they found out it was another driver and they were fired right afterwards. I had an interview that was unlike any other interview I've ever had. It was a room full of other applicants and the interviewer. The interviewer was telling us about the job, asked if anyone had any questions, then said we were all hired. I didn't fill any paperwork out, thank goodness. After he said we were all hired, half the people including myself walked out. The job was to go door to door selling knives, and we would have to pay $2,000 for our demo set of knives. Nope, no thanks. Started telemarketing job at 8 a.m. Left at lunch because I couldn't stand how supervisor pushed us to lie to make sales. Gas station Starbucks, 2 months. Manager was incredibly passive-aggressive and stole our tips and input them as sales. She was tight with the owner, so nothing we said mattered. They also charged for every little thing, including water. When it was said and done, a regular beverage was like $9 or $10. About 5 minutes after being hired, Enough time to be shown around by the director of nursing and meet the administration. I introduced myself and he said, "Why should I care?" I just went "fuck this" and walked out. 2 weeks. I was basically left to run an entire laboratory by myself with half a day's training, and the lab manager was leaving for an overseas trip the next day. Would wake up with anxiety attacks after dreaming my bedroom was full of lab equipment. I quit a babysitting job after 2 weeks, I think. They were paying me $100 for 40 hours a week. Nope, that's slave wages. 1 week. Worked as a delivery driver for a national pizza chain in high school. Got my first paycheck at the end of the week and it was stupidly low. I reported my tips. They deducted them from my hourly wage. Took off my shirt right in front of my manager, and literally walked across the parking lot to the Chinese place with a driver's wanted sign in the window. I started driving for them the next day. Babysitting job as a 6th grader for a baby toddler, and the dad came home during lunch and tried to get me in the bedroom with a nudie magazine. I was terrified. It was a small gas station owned by one person. During the interview she told me that if I came into the gas station not on my shift and I saw it was busy, I should help behind the register. I worked at a hotel for a matter of 3 hours because I listened to the hotel manager talk on the phone about wanting to strangle and murder a staff member. I was taking a training course on the computer, immediately got up and did not return. He seemed off before that and that did it in for me. 4 hours. It was a telemarketing job and my trainer was a sexual harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. Worked at 24 Hour Fitness when I was 17. Wanted to go skiing for a week and was told no, it was impossible to schedule. Just walked out. Manager was fuming, yelling about marking me as a no rehire or some bullshit. I found a job at LA Fitness down the street that paid more after my ski trip. Good times. A few weeks after, at a retail job. Hired for holiday work. They offered to keep me on after the holiday. I said okay, but I will need a week in January off because I'm visiting a friend. Already had plane tickets. They said okay and then put me on the schedule anyways. Screw that. I quit voter canvassing because I got a gun pulled on me. This was almost 20 years ago in Dallas. It's a long story, but I was hired at a call center and I made it to the first training. The people I was with were super nice, the supervisor was pleasant, and I even took a couple of practice calls. But as I was driving home, I got this enormous sense of dread thinking about going back. I could barely sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I turned off my alarm, went back to bed, and never went in again. In 2007, I got hired to work at a Hungry Howie's Pizza location in Saginaw, Michigan. I did the 3-hour training orientation shift and then get told I would get called the next week to be told what my regular schedule would be. I finished the shift, and come home and turn on the local news. One of the top stories was about how a pizza delivery driver somewhere in the city had to shoot someone who was trying to rob him while he was making a delivery. I drove back to the location and handed them my hat and shirt the same night. Worked at Sonic for 3 hours. They made us wear skates and I fell and busted my ass and quit immediately. I was a teenager and thought I'd master skating day one, lol. Worked at one of those Amazon factory jobs, graveyard shift. First day, saw how depressed everyone was and decided that would be my first and last shift. Clocked out and never looked back. I got a job at a local coffee shop and the staff didn't talk to each other hardly at all. The register was an old one with every key, like 50 at least, labeled with an item. It didn't automatically calculate change, and I was using Canadian coins, I'm American. I was so overwhelmed after one 2-hour training shift that I just told the owner I wasn't gonna come back for the next